This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Well, free agency has started for the Cleveland Browns. Look, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, this regime of the Cleveland Browns, has never been shy about being aggressive in the trade market, especially for wide receivers, right? The Browns traded for Amari Cooper. The Browns traded for Elijah Moore. And now a third piece to that puzzle has been traded for, and that is Jeudy. Now, it's interesting because wherever there's smoke with the Cleveland Browns, there's usually fire when it comes to who they're interested in going after in the trade market. Remember, we heard about them going after Elijah Moore for 2 years. Jeudy, very similar. But the thing about this regime is while they are aggressive, they're not impatient. As much as Andrew Berry talks about not being patient, he waited 2 years until the price was right on Elijah Moore to make the move for Elijah Moore, right? He was decided, I'm going to wait till it turns into a trade back instead of a straight up trade of picks to get Elijah Moore. And he got Elijah Moore. Jeudy, the same thing, right? The Browns wanted Jeudy at the deadline. They wanted to go after Jeudy in the offseason last year, but the price was never right. But now they felt like the price was right. What is the price on Jeudy? How much was it for the Browns to bring him on? It's a twofold question, right? It's a question of how much money that's going to cost, and it's a question of what the actual trade compensation is. And the trade compensation is that the Browns gave the Broncos a 5th and 6th round pick for Jeudy. So similar compensation that they gave up for Amari Cooper. Now, remember, Amari Cooper was probably less compensation because the Browns were taking in $20 million in cap space, which is about the top third of wide receiver money. For Jeudy, you're only taking in $12 million, which is about middle of the pack to less of what wide receivers tend to get in the market. Now, does this mean that the Browns are done with the wide receiver position totally? I don't think so, but you have to acknowledge that they have tried to put new bodies into this room over the last couple of years. I mean, we got to call it what it is. This is an overhaul. They've overhauled the wide receiver position from what it was in 2020 and 21, where there was Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. And now, I mean, it's a completely different wide receiver room. I don't think anybody's here still from 2021 when it comes to those wide receivers. Now it's Amari Cooper, who was traded for in 2022. It's Jeudy, who was just traded for this year. It's Elijah Moore, who was traded for last year. It's Cedric Tillman and David Bell. And I think there's one more name that I'm probably missing in that equation, but I'm pretty sure that player is relatively new to the team as far as the rotational guys that they have here. So I don't think it's out the question that they draft a wide receiver, but I don't think that they feel a super pressing need there, right? I think they feel like they have enough at the wide receiver position. Now, the irony here, right? The Browns traded pick 135 and pick 202 in the draft, right? So that pick 135, that 5th round pick, you know how the Browns got that 5th round pick. Well, it's Carolina's 5th round pick from the Baker Mayfield trade. And ironically enough, this pick 202 that they traded in the 6th round, I believe that's the Houston Texans pick that you got in the Deshaun Watson trade. So the irony is hilarious in that you used the pick from the Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield trades, picks that were pretty forgotten about, right? When you talk about those trades, like nobody really talks about, because it's not really relevant, that the Browns got stuff back for Baker Mayfield or Deshaun Watson in return for that trade because the compensation was like day 3. But they were able to turn that into Jeudy, right? So if you look at the Deshaun Watson trade and you look at the big picture of it, depending on how things work out this year, it could flip, because if Deshaun Watson has a good year and Jeudy has a good year, you could say, well, like getting Jerry Jeudy is a direct result of trading for Deshaun Watson and getting rid of Baker Mayfield. So if that works out, it works out. Another thing to note here is that Jerry Judy's been a more productive receiver than Elijah Moore was last year, who they traded back to the third round to get. And that is worth noting, right? Like, this is not somebody who has no production. Underwhelming production for somebody who was drafted in the spot that he was. He was a first round pick 15 selection. But think about this. We traded basically a trade back in the second round to get Elijah Moore because he was a second round prospect that they like. This is a prospect that they like in 2020 that they drafted around the same spot that they got Jed Wills in. And, you know, the production hasn't been amazing here in Denver, as I'm showing his Pro Football Focus page on screen. But, you know, it's not been terrible. I think he's come off of about a 600-yard performance last year. I'll get the full numbers up momentarily. But it's not a horrible production slate. It's just a little underwhelming for somebody drafted in the top 15. Here we go. So he had a close to 1,000-yard season a couple of years ago. Let me pull this up on screen for you guys. Other thing to note is that the production for Jerry Jeudy is a little bit different than the story for Elijah Moore. So last year, he got about 758 yards, 2 touchdowns. As much as people were complaining about Elijah Moore, if Elijah Moore was able to get those numbers, we would be happy with it. The year before in 2022, 972 yards, 6 touchdowns, which would be excellent if the Browns could have a close to 1,000-yard receiver opposite of Amari Cooper, and also work in Elijah Moore there. Now, what does this mean for Elijah Moore? I think it just means that they're going to use Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore. I don't think Elijah Moore is going to be forgotten about, but I think Elijah Moore is going to be put in a bit of a more position to succeed, and they're really putting some pieces around this offense in order to ensure some success. And this makes sense with the focus that we think is coming to the pass game, given that the Browns went out after Ken Dorsey got rid of their offensive coordinator from last year, Alex Van Pelt. It seems like this is where the offense is heading. We're looking at Jerry Jeudy's combine numbers. He ran a 4.45, a vertical jump of 35 inches. It's crazy. Myles Garrett jumped 41 inches in the air in the combine, and like 35 is a really good number, but like the dog at 272. But enough about Myles Garrett. Yeah, Jerry Jeudy was a pretty highly touted prospect coming out of college. Lance Zierlein compared him to Santonio Holmes. There's a lot of pedigree there, right? He has some promise. Had those weird issues last year with Steve Smith, you know, just calling him a guy or whatever it was, but gets a new start here in Cleveland, and I think that will be what's best for him. The cap hit for Jerry Jeudy is going to be about $13 million, so not nothing, right? That's a good amount of money, but it's not a ton of money for a wide receiver, right? That's about what you would have paid for to probably get like a Mike Williams. So if you were like me, somebody who was looking forward to the Browns getting like a Mike Williams, this is not a good sign for you. They're probably not going after Mike Williams. I think they're sitting pretty with Jerry Jeudy. We'll see what the Browns do as free agency continues, but this is a huge first move that they have made in this direction. This is a huge first step that they've made with Jerry Jeudy. I think this is really good news for all parties involved, especially the Cleveland Browns and Jerry Jeudy. As far as what it goes for the Broncos, we all know what the Broncos are doing. They have no interest in winning this year, right? The Broncos are just trying to get picks for players. They're rebuilding. They're doing a complete rebuild. They're tearing it down, right? And that's unfortunate for Denver because as much as people try to compare Cleveland and Denver, the fact is that Denver was called a team that was a quarterback away a couple of years ago. They haven't even made the playoffs, and they can use adversity as their excuse. But they had good quarterback play last year. They couldn't find a way to make the playoffs, and now they're rebuilding. The Browns had 4 different quarterbacks last year, were not deemed the roster of the future in 2021 for whatever reason, and have found a way to make the playoffs despite having a ton of their salary cap on injured reserve. So go figure with that one. This is a good situation for Jerry Jeudy. The Browns need somebody who's going to be a more consistent deep threat than Marquise Goodwin, right? If they're going to switch this offense around, they need somebody who's produced some numbers. Jerry Jeudy hasn't had overwhelming production, but he has had production every year, right? This is a little bit of a different story than Elijah Moore. And I think this allows Elijah Moore to do more of the things that he's comfortable with, because since he was one of like the only fast guys available, especially after Marquise Goodwin's injury, he had to take a lot of the deep stuff, which means now he's in a position to just kind of take what it is. And you don't have to put all this pressure on Cedric Tillman to be good this year. You can let him develop, because as we've seen, there's going to be a very long, like there's a long curve, there's a big curve of what he has to learn in order to be an NFL wide receiver and a helpful wide receiver to the Cleveland Browns. Think of Jerry Jeudy not as a replacement for like Elijah Moore or Amari Cooper, and more of somebody who's here to replace the role that Donovan Peoples-Jones had, or maybe it's going to be a competition between Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy, and the loser gets Donovan Peoples-Jones's old role. But that's what the Browns are doing. They want to make sure they have 3 solid wide receivers, pretty much on the field at all times. And it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. But you can't say that wide receiver room is not full of potential. You have Amari Cooper there, who just came off of a 1,200-yard season. We know he's solid, reliable dude. And then you have Elijah Moore, who I thought put together a strong second half of his season, but really didn't have a good first half of the season. And Jerry Jeudy in a similar light, right? He got all that criticism. People were talking about him at the trade deadline. They couldn't even get off of him because the trades just weren't good enough for him. And then he put together a stronger second half of the season and really quieted some criticism with his play in the second half of the season. So we'll see where this all goes. But the Browns have a very talented wide receiver room that has a ton of potential. And even with that potential, you know that Elijah Moore is good for 600 yards. You know that a healthy Jerry Jeudy is good for 700 to 900 yards, maybe even 1,000. And then you have Amari Cooper. So right there between 3 guys, you have almost 2,400 yards of receiving alone. Then you add in David Njoku, who's good for close to 800 to 1,000 yards. So you're talking about 3,500 yards, and then you got guys that you want to fit in where they get, like Cedric Tillman, like David Bell. Maybe they draft somebody. They got a second tight end that they need to factor in. If the Browns want to throw the ball and have a lot more passing production than they did last year, well, this is a step in the right direction, because you just look at the guys who've been able to produce their numbers in the NFL. If they do that, it should add up to at least 4,000, 5,000 yards. And that's where you want to be if you're the Cleveland Browns. So look, this move virtually cost you nothing. Trades for late round draft picks in a draft like this, where because of NIL, there's not a ton of draft eligible players, right? Like this draft has the least amount of draft eligible players in a very long time, or I think ever, in the NFL since they've been recording that kind of thing. And since that's the case, that the draft eligibility, NIL has really cut down the number of prospects, these late round picks mean less and less and less. And, especially like 6th and 7th round picks, where now even the guys who are available of a shallow draft pool, there might be like a couple guys that you want that don't want to be drafted because they would rather go undrafted and pick where they play and try to get a bigger signing bonus, right? So it's just those day 3 picks just don't matter as much as they did maybe 10 years ago. And even 10 years ago, they weren't super valuable, right? So I don't mind this trade at all. I had Brent Sobolewski on this morning, and he told me the Browns might have like 100 players on their board. So this might be a draft that they're just trying to get rid of these late round picks. Like they don't want to pick in the 6th, 7th round. They want to pick in the 3rd, the 2nd, and just come out here with maybe 4 or 5 guys, and they'll be fine with it because there's not a lot of guys who fit their profile in this year's draft. So I think that's a fair assessment by Brett, and I think that's probably where the Browns are going. In a trade like this shows you that right now they're going to value veteran players who have produced over potential draft picks. I mean, that's kind of where they've been at for the last couple of years, but they traded for Jeudy. I think this is a good move. At the very least, you're gonna upgrade wide receiver too, if not the whole room. You still have Elijah Moore, who's very talented. I think he could be very productive with Deshaun Watson at the quarterback position. We know that Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson have good chemistry. You look at Jerry Jeudy and you look at somebody like a Will Fuller, and there's some similarities there where he can use them in a similar way. A good route runner. And, there were some questions about maturity, but the Browns feel like they have a good locker room. And this is the advantage of having a good locker room, is that you feel like you could take troubled guys from bad situations like the Denver Broncos and get them into your culture and get them right, because not only is he going to come into a room that is trying to win football games right now, where the expectations are much higher than they were last year in Denver, but you also come into a room with a guy like Amari Cooper in it, who is exactly who you want to be if you're Jerry Jeudy, right? Like, you want to have the career that Amari Cooper has had, and you went to Alabama, so there's probably a relationship there between you and Amari Cooper, just through alumni outreach programs that they have going. And that's a good spot. Like, that's a good spot for him to like develop, learn. Maybe he'll listen to Coop. Maybe Coop can speak to him in a way that kind of gets to him in a way that coaches haven't been able to get to him. This is a good move. I think some people are going to see this and be mad because they have strong opinions about Jerry Jeudy because Steve Smith said something negative about him. But think about, what your issues are with them versus what the production is. The production is not terrible. It's just underwhelming for the hype that he had coming out of college. Think about what the potential is with a wide receiver with his skill set, and the fact that he's coming into a good situation in the Cleveland Browns that have veterans that are really might be able to help this dude like become who he needs to be. And it doesn't even take Amari Cooper being active with him. It might just be just watching Amari Cooper might be something that's useful for him, because who has he really had to follow since he's gotten to Denver? It's a real question. But that's my thoughts on this trade. Very interesting. It seems like the opening, not the closing to the Browns free agency. So we'll see what else goes down with this team. But Andrew Berry starting off the free agency period with the bang, going after Jerry Jeudy and getting him after, trying to get him for the last year. So we'll see how this goes. But I'm excited. I think this is a good move. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.